Hello, YouTube. I want to talk today once again about the Kuril Island range and the unusual islands and the secrets they contain to the extent that we are able to find out. Some years ago, I talked about the island of Matua, and my videos got a lot of views, and a number of people became interested for the good reason, because there is something inside that island that attracts attention of the Russian military today, but also when it was under Japanese control, they were quite interested. There are a lot of secrets about it. I think the United States was also quite interested in having the possession of the island, and you can see it all in my videos, but at this point we're just not sure whether it contains the incredible secrets from World War II or extraterrestrial connection, and I'll tell you why. In my book, about the USOs in Russia's USOs secrets, you can see quite a lot about the Far East of Russia, and especially about the area of the Kuril Islands and the sightings that were recorded and incredible encounters. And I kept doing research year after year. For example, you can see my video about the island of Rashua, not very far from Matua, and the strange underwater sunken city-like observations that were made, and there is much more. And the location itself is very strategic, of course, right next to Japan, and of course the United States forces in China is not far away, and so is North Korea. But I think what is hidden there is outside of the realm of modern geopolitics, and powers that be know about this. So today I want to talk about another island, Urup Island, and reportedly incredible discoveries at the edge of the world. That's how the Russians phrase it. Those had the ability to write about it. And it's a very interesting island. The shores of the Pacific Oceans have been famous since ancient times for seals, and to the shores of this island, Urup, Kazakhs were sent back in 1711, but there is more to its history, which I will talk later in the video, because you need to understand what took place and maybe why. But Urup, it's one of the central islands of the Kuril range, and that's how, according to the Russians, it was discovered. But of course, it's not so. It was discovered well before then. But, however, for a long time, little was known about this island. But in 2021, details emerged that, according to the Russians, appear to turn the ideas about the history of the island upside down. And it happened due to the diligent efforts of the Russian military expedition. We can only surmise what exactly they were looking for. The official explanation is that it's to study the inaccessible corners of Russia. That's the main direction of the Expeditionary Center of the Ministry of Defense, created for basically this special purpose on the initiative of the head of the ministry, Shoigu. This decision was inevitable because without the use of special equipment, it's almost impossible to get into hard-to-reach and impassable places on the northern islands. Why there is such a hurry nowadays? Well, obviously they discovered something on Matua some years before, and I think the discovery spread out. The head of the Expeditionary Center of the Russian Defense Ministry, Yevgeny Benyukov, noted that in a short time, enormous experience has been gained in different natural and climatic zones. The study of the Kuril Ridge began in 2017, and 2 years later, Russian scientists first appeared on the island of Urup, so that was after Matua. The experts initially landed at one point of the island and conducted preliminary archaeological and landscape studies. They managed to study only a few kilometers. They failed to move deeper. I wonder why and what is it that the Russian military had encountered there at that time. The second attempt took place in 2021. A group of scientists was assembled whose goal was to study the fourth largest island in the Kuril Ridge. That's the Urup island. The Il-76 transport plane was loaded with tons of cargo necessary for a complex expedition: food, tents, personal belongings, special equipment. The participants were specially provided with the Admiral Nevelskoy large amphibious assault ship. This is the most suitable ship for such tasks. It is equipped with everything necessary and can accommodate up to 10 tanks and 300 paratroopers in the hold. How interesting. So they had to use paratroopers and tanks for this mission, or maybe just have them just in case. The length of the studied object is 117 kilometers. The width is 18 kilometers. Total area is 1,500 square kilometers. 1,511 square kilometers. Urup Island literally translates as Salmon Island or Fish Island, as its rivers shine with an abundance of wild fish. During the Soviet Union days, special observation posts of the Pacific Fleet were equipped on the island. I read one comment from Russian observers that in 1975 the island was researched thoroughly and that there are diaries. I'm sure they're classified. I'm sure they're very interesting diaries, but again, classified. Until the early 1990s, a large military town was located there. Valuable finds, in order to study the flora and fauna of the island as much as possible, the expedition center changed the tactics of work. Several groups of scientists were landed at different points of the island. The base camp was built in a bay on the ocean shore, a few kilometers from which an abandoned strip of a Japanese military airfield was discovered. The expedition members found other fragments of armored vehicles abandoned by the Japanese on the island. Scientists also found remains of settlements of ancient inhabitants of the Kurils near the Novokurilska Bay, where a temporary camp was set up. The location turned out to be very successful. It was possible to engage in hunting, fishing, and gathering of items. Archaeologists had to excavate meter-thick layers of sand to find out who lived there before. Previously, the Ainu tribes were considered the indigenous inhabitants of the islands. But thanks to the excavations, archaeologists found out that the discovered artifacts, a type of ceramics with a characteristic protrusion on the ear, belonged to an earlier era, to the descendants of the people of the Gemon period, from the 12th millennium BC, before Common Era, to the 3rd century BC, before Common Era. The sensational discovery gave an answer to important questions: how Alaska was settled and how the Pacific peoples, Eskimos, Ainu, and others, were formed. Thus, it was established that the first population that passed through the entire Kuril Ridge were carriers of the Epizemon culture. This confirms the connection of the ancestors of the Ainu culture with the Dzemon culture. In the most generalized form, the legend of Tsorpok Kuru look like this. When the Ainu came to Hokkaido, Sakhalin, they encountered people living in dugouts and making ceramic dishes. The representatives of these people were of short stature and outwardly did not differ much from the Ainu. Just like the latter, they hunted land and sea animals and fished. In addition, they used to kidnap Ainu women, because of which the Ainu began to wage wars with this tribe, and in the end forced them to leave Hokkaido, Sakhalin area. In Hokkaido, this mythical Doin tribe was called Tsorpok Kuru. On the Sakhalin, they were called Tonki. This is from the work on the history of the question of Tsorpok Kuru from the Ainu culture to the Dzemon culture, written by Akulova. Scientists and geologists have collected many samples after a long journey, including for a detailed study of flora and fauna, which can become another sensation. The discovered invertebrate species will be taken to the Zoological Museum of Moscow State University for a thorough study. Dozens of meters from the shore, researchers found the skeleton of a huge sperm whale, which will be sent to the museum for study. The staff of the Research Zoological Museum of Lomonosov, Moscow State University, consider this a great success. There are not so many whale skulls because they are heavy and they are not so easy to deliver across thousands of kilometers. Environmentalists insist that the water area and land of Urup Island become a protected area and receive the status of a nature reserve. But in order to realize this, it is necessary to complete a detailed and comprehensive study of the Kuril Islands. In this regard, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation decided to extend the study program until 2026. They say this will make it possible to explore the Kuril Ridge in 10 different directions in order to ultimately establish its strategic importance for the Russian state. So I really don't think that Russia, especially now, will use its military forces and military scientists to study the flora and fauna of a very remote island. And my understanding, my belief is that they have definitely found something, probably beneath the surface of the island, just like Matua, going deep inside, or in the waters. I understand they also found a sunken American submarine from World War II, but that's a different story. That's not why they would explore the territory and vicinity of the island. It's a very unusual territory, and few people, almost no one, talks about it in the West. So I was glad I brought the Matua story forth, and will continue. But there were other people who visited the island in 2021, and it wasn't the military. There were private tourists, I don't want to say expeditions, but groups that went to the island. I'm sure it had to be before. I'm sure it had to be before. Here are some notes. Urup remains an almost deserted island. Its permanent residents are lighthouse keepers. As for the military, the research of the islands with the support of the Ministry of Defense continues to this day, and probably future expeditions will reveal even more secrets of the Kuril Islands. Each sensational discovery allows you to get answers to questions that have remained unexplored for a long time. So we're done with the military information. But like I said, other people visited the island in 2021, and it had to be before the extensive military expedition. And they said that Urup Island was the first on the list of uninhabited islands that they had visited. There are no particularly beautiful sights there, but it's just beautiful there. You can walk along the deserted shore looking for treasures brought by the sea and enjoy solitude and peace. What treasures, you ask? Real ones. Marine ones, for example, wonderful glass balls. There are floats, that's just a nickname given. The sandy shore of Urup is a good place to go and search for them. No one has ever left there without some kind of loot. Secondly, there is a river where fish go to spawn. Thirdly, there are hot springs in the same place, not far from their landing place. Rather, a hot water bath located on the balcony on the hillside. That's how they refer to those hot water springs. Fourth, foxes and Arctic foxes living on Urup have never seen anything bad from a human being, so they do not hesitate to come out to communicate with human beings. Urup, now I'll give you some background history. I couldn't find much more information about Urup Island. There are good reasons, but let's look at the history. Urup is first clearly shown on an official Japanese map in the year 1644, identifying it as part of the territories of the Matsuma clan, a feudal domain of Edo, Japan. Now, the Russian fur traders appeared in the late 18th century, hunting sea otters and seizing foreign ships in the area. There were clashes between the Russians and the Ainu in 1772, and the Russians left the island for a time, but soon returned. There was an interesting book in French, I believe, but it was published in Amsterdam in 1766, Müller's Voyages and Discoveries Made in Russia. It's a rough translation. It contained a list and description of the Kuril Islands, including Urup, whose people were said to trade with the Japanese, but were not under their control. A small Russian presence was established on Urup by the fur trader Ivan Chorny in 1768, acting on instructions from the governor of Siberia. During the 1770s, it was the base for attempts to establish trade with the Japanese on Yezo, which is, I believe, it's Hokkaido today, which came to an end when it was destroyed by tsunami in June of 1780. In the 19th century, during the decade following 1795, a party of 40 Russian men and women under Zvezdachotov established a colony there they called Slava Rossiya, or Glory to Russia, on Urup. In 1801, the Japanese government officially claimed control of the island, incorporating it into Ezo province, now it's Hokkaido prefecture. This led to a series of clashes with Imperial Russia over Urup and other Kuril Islands, and finally the sovereignty passed to Russia initially. But during World War II, all civilian inhabitants of the island were allocated to the Japanese home islands, and towards the end of the war, the Imperial Japanese Army stationed approximately 6,000 troops on Urup. That's quite a lot for such a small island. During the invasion of the Kuril Islands after the end of World War II, Japanese forces on Urup surrendered without resistance. We're speaking about Soviet army taking control over the islands. How interesting. They did not resist on Matua Island, the Japanese, and they did not resist the Soviets on the island of Urup. There had to be a reason, and I explained it about Matua, and I think it's the same here. I think what they had to hide was hidden, and maybe they didn't want to bring any further destruction or attention to what they were hiding. In 1952, upon signing the Treaty of San Francisco, Japan renounced its claim to the island. Soviet border troops occupied the former Japanese military facilities there, but the troops were withdrawn upon the disintegration of the Soviet Union in 1991, and the co-located airfield was turned into a bombing range. That's all we know. Between 1991 and 2021, not much activity took place, at least from the Russian side, but now they're actively exploring there. And all we can say is, let's stay tuned. I don't expect much from Western media in terms of understanding the importance of UFO research and USO research in the former Soviet Union and modern Russia, and China as well. So I will do my efforts on bringing you the stories from that region and turning your attention to other parts of the world when it comes to UFOs and USOs, not only the United States or Great Britain, for example, not to diminish the importance of sightings anywhere. But the more we find out about the rest of the world, the better it is. Thank you for your attention to my work. If you can support my research, you will find on how to do it in the links to this video. Please like my videos. Please subscribe to my channel.